Hi, so in this video, we're going to kind of talk a few points about the preparing your custom mesh for character transfer. We have this character already loaded, and you can see this Allison character has about the same cut line as Mark. So that's the first thing to be aware that if you have your full body character, you want to kind of like separate the face from the rest of the body. This is to kind of like help make the performance a lot better for the binding, and also make the process a lot easier later on. So the recommended cut line is somewhere around the same cut area as Mark. It could be slightly higher or lower. Doesn't affect too much. In this case, these two characters are very close. I think at the back you'll see that Allison has a shorter than what Mark's cut area is. Cool. So that is the first. That is the cut line. Second is the mouth cavity. Our Mark geometry has mouth cavity in there. If I show the wireframe mode, oh yeah, wireframe mode. This is both the meshes are really dense, as you can see here, but you see that we have this cavity here, and the cavity shape might be different between the two characters. That is fine, but if possible, you kind of like avoid having the gum details on the cavity. That is also helps with the tagging later on, so that you don't have too excessive geometries sort of um, inside the mouth that you kind of like have to keep calculating. So having clean mouth cavity is in this case is recommended, um, like also like Mark here. Um, if you just want to test the mouth cavity or the eye cutout here, can like the eye socket here as well, is again not mandatory. The transfer should work, providing that you provide enough points to kind of define where the correspondence should be. The um, the eye socket is also recommended if possible. So um, like in this character, and this character also have eye socket. If I try to select, if I can select the eye, I can hide it, and you see that this character also have the eye socket here. But I've done some uh, transfer test to characters without the mouth cavity or without the mouth socket. That is fine. Again, with the idea is that they will not, of course, not separate like so. The next is this geometry has to be a one continuous single mesh. So if I go to Maya now, probably it's easier to see here. This mesh is one continuous mesh. So there is no like sometimes when you have mesh, you might have the eyebrow kind of like merge with this mesh, and the eyebrow is actually a separate polygon kind of like strip or planes that is kind of floating on here, or the eyelashes are like extra meshes, or even the eyeballs is merged with this whole mesh. So um, as long as those mesh belong to this surface, as in it is one continuous surface, that is fine. But anything that is separated, are not connected topologically to this main skin mesh, has to be separated out. So we want to make sure that when you say to go to face and you double click the face, you are able to kind of like move everything away from uh, uh, that is not that is have in the same continuous mesh, like so. All right. Also avoid having points collapse into single points, like So if you have these faces being scaled so small to to a single point, try to avoid that. So keep them, if your mesh is relatively regular, that will be better. So that is regarding the extra meshes here. These meshes, as I've shown in other demo, can still be binded later on to be driven by this mesh. So on our next versions of A2F that will have control on the eyeball as well, the eyeball can be separated like so, and they'll be driven separately, right? Next is that we want to make sure that all these meshes, this main mesh and the facial hairs and all this kind of stuff, all have the same kind of transform center. So it's usually a good idea to kind of like, in Maya, for example, you want to make sure that you freeze them and then you reset their transform. So go to modify freeze transformations, and then modify reset transformation. This is basically just to make sure that all their pivot are in the same spot. The reason for this is because our deformation calculation in character transfer is all based on this local space. So if their pivots are different, if their character in theory, this geometry may look like they're overlapping on each other, but they're actually have different transform. Um, uh, just made that in world space the points look, they're close to each other, but in local space they're all kind of separated. So we want to make sure that the local space, what you see is like they actually belong together. So the easiest way to do that is that when you prepare your mesh, that you freeze the transform, make sure all are in the origin, like so. Next is the mesh density. So this mesh is pretty good. We can see from if I go to display, heads up display, on poly count, this is around 48,000 points. So our mark mesh is about the same density as well. I think that both are yeah, about the same density, and that's kind of like, in theory, the maximum density that you that goes well with this. Um, what happens if you have denser mesh is that, well, they will not pick up any more details from the deformation, just because there's no such information in the driving mesh anyway. So and in fact, that the denser your mesh are, the longer it will take to do everything. So your fitting process will take quite some time, and then your post wrap will take some time, and then the updates will also be slow. You have kind of a performance hit on the FPS later on. So you want to keep the mesh density, kind of like manageable, and for the cutout head, in this case, like this human head, about 40K is probably the maximum you should go. And then lastly, if you plan on having this mesh later on be driving the full body, like has skin cluster driven full body, or the USD scale, um, then you want to make sure that this cutout head is at the bind state of the USD scale, or this of your skin deformation, so that later on when you feed this back to the skin, it will still kind of like match. So yeah, so that's all I can say about the custom mesh. Thank you.